Jeff Brown. Jeff Brown is the assessor of the County of Los Angeles. As the 27th assessor in Los Angeles County history, he serves as the elected leader of the largest public assessment agency in the United States. For more than 25 years, Jeff has been serving the public, most recently as the city council member and the mayor of the city of West Hollywood. He previously served with the Los Angeles County Sheriff, Los Angeles City Council, County Assessor, and as an Assistant City Manager. Jeff Brown is a California Board of Equalization License Appraiser. He's a leader of the County Assessors Association, representing California's 58 assessors, and serves as the member of the International Association of Assessing Officers. He was born in Detroit and raised in Warren, Michigan. Jeffrey Brown is a graduate of James Madison College at Michigan State University. Now we'll have the guest speaker, Jeffrey Brown. Jeff, are you ready? We cannot hear you, unfortunately. Phone, can you, Albert? Yes, there you go. Unmute, Jeff.
Okay, how are you doing? Everybody can hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, good morning. Thank you, Sharon. And thank you very much for inviting me to be a part of your program this morning. I commend you for your efforts to try to keep the wheels of business running despite the quarantine that we're all under. I know it's really difficult. It's particularly difficult for real estate professionals. But I guess we need to do what we can do with the time that we have to prepare for when government and business and society begins to open again. It's going to be a really different world than it was back in January. But the earlier that we plan, the earlier that we have these conversations, hopefully we can minimize the impact that's going to affect all of us for the months to come, probably through into next year. So let me forgive me if I have to keep looking down at my notes. My staff is online. I'm going to be working a PowerPoint, give you something more attractive to look at other than me. I did, as you've probably all heard me begin my remarks when I spoke to you in the past, always like to do a little bit of public education about my department and clarify what I do and what I don't do. Just as a clarification, I'm technically not the tax assessor. There actually is no such thing as a tax assessor. We have an assessor, we have a tax collector. So a lot of people conflate those two titles. I'm just the assessor. I don't do property taxes. The tax collector does property taxes. I'm just in charge of the valuation. And as you know, we have a very large department. We've got 1,400 employees, a close to $200 million budget, and we're responsible for assessing 2.5 million parcels a year. Last year, that was all property in LA County was valued about $1.7 trillion, which generated about $17 billion in property taxes. We are preparing to see a very different environment next year. Just as a reminder about how the property tax system works, very quickly, if you purchase a home or if you pull out a building permit from your local city, those permits and those deeds are then submitted to my office by the registrar recorder. We then do the evaluation on the property. When we're done with our evaluation annually, we submit all of our information called the assessment roll to the auditor controller. The auditor controller is the one who tells you what you owe. And then the auditor controller sends that information to the tax collector, or formerly the treasurer and tax collector, who sends you your bill and collects the money. And then if you don't like the outcome of your property taxes and you challenge it, you could go before the Assessment Appeals Board, which is a division of the LA County Board of Supervisors. So that's the 30-second review of how the property tax system works. We've been dealing with a lot of public service over the last couple of months. A lot of people are very concerned about about their taxes, about the filing deadlines, and all the other things that are impacting individuals and businesses because of the COVID-19 virus. And we've been working very hard to try to respond to those and to provide information to guide people through the process, even if it's not relevant to our department. We try to get them the answers that they want about the entire property tax administrative chain. So as you are probably aware, that the property taxes are one of the two primary sources of revenue that the county government, city government, and school districts use to pay for their services. So it could be public health, all the public hospitals, the doctors and the nurses, they all are paid for significantly through property tax dollars. And so we're doing the best we can do to keep production moving, to appraise all the changes in ownership and all the new construction permits that have come in over the course of the next year, to ensure that property taxes will be not maximized for individuals, but making sure that everything that needs to be counted will be counted. Next year is going to be very difficult for local government because, as I indicated, sales taxes and property taxes are two of the primary sources of revenue. However, there's virtually no sales taxes. With retail businesses all but shut down, cities, schools, and the county are all really struggling with cash flow and the impact on their budget because of the loss of sales taxes. And we're going to start seeing curtailments in public services, whereas people want more investment in, whether it be in public health or in roads. There's going to be fewer public employees doing more work, so the lines will be longer and the requests will take longer to get done going forward. For my part, I'm trying to do the best we can do to keep the property tax system moving forward, to ensure that that's at least a more stable source of revenue for those services that we all rely upon. However, because of COVID, we have taken extraordinary steps to protect the lives and safety of our employees. I'm pleased to report that about 85 to 95% of our 1,400 employees are working from home. We've actually even had some good news in a few categories. Apparently working from home has been helpful, and some of our employees are actually producing more work than they were when they were coming to the office. So that's a positive sign, although there's all types of lost production on other elements as well. One of the big ones where we're doing no work whatsoever is on assessment appeals. So if you're waiting for your, if you're challenging your property tax assessment, you think it's too high or too low, although we don't get a whole lot of people thinking it's too low. But the appeals board is not meeting, the hearing officers are not meeting, so the backlog of assessment appeals is getting bigger and bigger. And once people get back to work, and once we start getting a better idea of what's happening in the real estate market, I think we're going to see that there's going to be even more appeals, which will make that system even more overtaxed. At this point, it's we get asked a lot about what's happening in the market, and I have to say that it's a little premature for me to make any speculation about what's going to happen over the next coming months. Although it seems pretty clear, just based on what's happening, that there is going to be a negative impact in the real estate market. We will have to analyze what type of transactions are happening during this period, see what's happening to property values during this period, to make a better conjecture about how it's actually impacting the market. We're getting a lot of questions. A lot of people, particularly commercial and industrial property owners, believe that their property is worth less today because of COVID-19 than it was last year. And in many cases, that may very well be the case. If you're a commercial industrial property owner and you had a lot of tenants, and your tenants are all closed, they're not paying you rent, you have mortgage payments due, you have no income, maybe your tenants are going out of business during all of this, during the middle of this crisis, you may believe that your property is worth less now than its assessed value. However, any decline in value that is occurring right now as a result of this crisis will not be reflected until January 1st of 2022. So the way the property tax system works is January 1st of every year is what we call the lien date. That is the date we establish the value of your property for property tax purposes. So the bill that you're going to get for your property taxes in November is actually based on its value January 1st of this year. So you're not going to see a reduction based on COVID-19 in your November bill. You will see it in the following November's 2021. You'll see it on that bill because January 1st of 2021 is when we will establish the lien date for the next billing year. And I did want to state right off the bat, a lot of this information is on my website, which is assessor.lacounty.gov. So let me talk a little bit about property taxes, and let me once again emphasize that I don't do property taxes. That's the jurisdiction of the LA County Treasurer and Tax Collector, but he's not here today. We do get a lot of questions about this, so I'm going to try to do the best I can do to give you some information that hopefully will clarify some issues regarding property taxes. So your second installment of property taxes were due on April the 10th. And if you don't pay on time, as you know, that there's a 10% penalty, and depending on what your tax burden is, that could be a pretty hefty penalty. A lot of people were asking the county to extend the property tax payment deadline like the state did for income taxes. However, that April 10th deadline is established by the state. It's in the Revenue and Taxation Code. So county tax collectors did not have the authority to postpone that property tax date. However, the local tax collector does have the authority to waive late penalties. And I've been talking frequently to the LA County tax collector, Keith Knox, who indicated that he's going to be very liberal, very generous in granting late penalty waivers for anybody impacted by the COVID virus. So if you didn't have enough money, if your cash flow was down and you simply were unable to pay on April 10th, it's important that you go to the tax collector's website, which is TTC, Treasurer Tax Collector, ttc.lacounty.gov, and right there on the main page, there's a link saying if you think if you want to apply to have your late fees waived, just fill out that application. I think that the chances of those late fees being waived are extremely high. It does require that you ask and go online to apply for a waiver. And again, the website to get that information is ttc.lacounty.gov. So a lot of folks were still pushing to have the filing date moved, but in effect, if the late fees are waived, it doesn't matter what the filing date is because they have the same net effect. And since if you've been impacted by COVID, there's a very, very good chance and high likelihood that your late penalties will be waived. There's also something similar dealing with business personal property. As you know, under California law, if you're a business and you own furniture, equipment, or machinery valued at $5,000 or more, you may be required to fill out an annual personal property statement and pay property taxes on that business property. If you have $100,000 of property or more, you are required to fill out one of these statements. Those statements are due. The filing is due on May the 7th, and if you don't file on May the 7th, there is a penalty associated with that. That one is a little bit more within my jurisdiction. And I've been seeking guidance from the state and from the Board of Equalization to see if the assessor can waive late filing penalties for those businesses that have been impacted by COVID. The guidance that we've gotten thus far is that the assessor does not have the authority to waive those penalties. We do have the ability to make recommendations to the Assessment Appeals Board, which is the agency which actually would grant the appeal. And I can state that I intend to, like the tax collector, I intend to be very liberal and generous in making recommendations for waivers of penalties to the Assessment Appeals Board. We'll have more information on that as we learn more from the state. So with personal income at a stretch to the limit, and a lot of people have no income whatsoever, it's a good time for to review all the different tax savings programs that are available. You've heard me speak in the past about the homeowners exemption. It's not a huge savings, but everybody who owns a home and uses it as their primary residence qualifies for the California homeowners exemption, which will lower your assessed value by $7,000 for property tax purposes and save you about $70 a year on your property taxes. As I had mentioned, about 1/3 of all property owners in LA County do not file for the homeowners exemption, primarily because they don't know about it. And this is something I can ask all of you as real estate professionals to do right now, is send a note to your, whether it be by email or however you communicate with your clients and your prospective client base. Tell them about the homeowners exemption. Say this is something you can do right now to get a little bit of relief on your property taxes. There's information on my website. You can clip and paste and just send it to all of your clients. Another subject that comes up all the time, and I usually repeat it because there's always somebody who didn't hear about it, deals with what to do upon the death of a property owner. So there's two major things that need to happen if an owner of property passes away. I know it's a difficult time, and right now it could be that we have friends and family who are impacted by COVID, and hopefully your families are all safe. But in case they there is a passing, there's a few things that you need to do. First, if the owner of property passes away, you're required to notify the assessor's office within 150 days of that death. You're required to fill out what is called a change in ownership, death of real property owner, with my office, and those forms are on our website. If you don't file that, it can still be done, but there's a possibility of penalties, and there's also even more likelihood a challenge and confusion if that property is being passed on to the children of the property owner. So one, you have 150 days to file the change in ownership, death of real property owner form. And if you are inheriting the property from your parents, they need to file what's called a Proposition 58 form. That's a parent-to-child exclusion. The parent-to-child exclusion allows a parent to give the property to the children without it being reassessed, meaning that the property taxes will not go up. This is not automatic. If we don't know about it, if we learn that the property owner has died, we will reassess the property to market value. So if your parents bought the property in 1990 for $200,000, but it's worth $1 million today, you're going to get a supplemental bill for the additional $800,000 in value. You're not going to be happy about that. To avoid that, file the change in ownership statement, as well as the Proposition 58 statement. The longer you wait, the more likelihood is that you'll have to pay more. You can get that information on my website, again, assessor.lacounty.gov. And let me also stress, if all this information, if you think that you are protected because your property is in a trust, you are not. You still must do these things whether your property is in a trust or not. If that death of a real property owner form is not filed, if a Prop 58 form is not filed, even if the property is in a trust, you will be receiving a supplemental assessment. So please be very, very careful. And we have a lot of that information on our website. Visit the tab on the website called Tools for Real Estate Professionals, which is my next topic. I always like to remind you that there is information specifically for realtors and other real estate professionals on our website. There's all the details on our tax savings programs. There's other information on there that'll provide you maps and recent sales, the supplemental tax estimator. And I encourage you to sign up for our electronic newsletter so that we can remind you of these programs that will help educate you to be a better realtor and help you provide that information to your client base. Also want to call your attention to a joint website between my office, the Treasurer Tax Collector, and the Auditor Controller. A lot of confusion about how these departments work. Everybody thinks all those functions are my department. They're not, but so that we wouldn't have to send people from door to door and say that's not my job, the three of our departments created a joint website which will help steer you to get the specific questions that you have. It's to get you to the right department. It is, I don't know what the website address is. I apologize. I should have that. But it is essentially it's a one-stop shop, and you can even access to your mobile device. And while I'm sitting here, somebody will get me that website that I can share with you. Let me talk a little bit now about the marketplace and what we've seen in the last year and what we're expecting going forward. So every year, the assessments of all property, the 2.5 million parcels that we assess annually, we assemble and combine into publish what's called the annual assessment roll, which is an inventory of all property in the county. Generally, it's an important economic indicator. It's used by local government to help them with their budget. Because of the COVID crisis, we're expecting a lot of impacts, and we think these numbers will be adjusted going forward. But just as a point of reference, in over the last 8 to 9 years, property values have been increasing on an annual basis. And last year, property values county-wide grew at 6.2%, which was about a $48 billion growth in the total value of the assessment roll. The West San Gabriel Valley, prior to COVID, there's a table that I've included here, which shows the annual growth of a number of cities: Arcadia, Azusa, El Monte, Glendora, San Gabriel, and South El Monte. All of them grew at a faster rate than the county average. But just before the stay-at-home measures were put into place last month, as of March of 2020, home sales and prices still remained high due to low mortgage interest rates that continue to keep demand up. The median sales price county-wide was $638,000. LA City was actually $817,000. We should expect that there will be some change in these numbers as we collect more information in the months ahead. Consumer confidence is down, and even though mortgage rates are close to zero, we have seen mortgage applications mortgage applications went down 11% in March and 24% year over year. We understand that web traffic on Zillow and Redfin is down 40% according to the Mortgage Bankers Association, which indicates prospective home buyers are simply not looking as actively as they did before. So we will probably have a little bit more, the closer we get to the closure of the annual assessment roll in in June, the more information we'll be able to provide you, and hopefully I could come back maybe in early July and let you know what we've seen over the last couple of months because of this COVID crisis. Let me backtrack again. I mentioned just a minute ago about the joint website of the Treasurer Tax Collector, Auditor Controller, and the Assessor. That website is propertytax.lacounty.gov. Again, that's propertytax.lacounty.gov. Now, the last topic I was asked to speak about deals with a measure that will be on the ballot in November called the split roll, or more accurately, the split assessment roll. I'm sure you're all familiar with this, but just to as a refresher, the split roll is called that because it proposes to split commercial and industrial assessments from residential assessments. The proposal, if adopted, would maintain residential property assessments the same as they currently are under Proposition 13. That would also include multifamily housing, apartment buildings, and condominiums, but it would mandate that all commercial and industrial properties be reassessed to market value either on an annual or cyclical basis, no more than every 3 years. The measure has qualified for the ballot in November and would be a fundamental shift in an amendment in the current event-based reassessment system under Proposition 13. When I say event-based, that means we only reassess property when there is an event, such as a sale or a transfer or new construction. If you own your property and you don't do anything to it, your property is not reassessed. It just is given the annual 2% maximum cost of living adjustment. But for commercial industrial properties under this plan, we would have to reassess the market value of commercial properties on an annual basis. So this presents a number of challenges to my office, and it will be labor intensive to implement. The first is because we do event-based reassessment, we're going to have to learn how to do our job in a manner that has not been done since prior to Prop 13 in 1978. That's the way most other states do it. They do an annual market analysis, and they do what they call mass appraisal, meaning they don't do a specific appraisal for your property. They look at a whole region and or different areas and come up with estimates that they apply to those types of properties. It's much more difficult with commercial industrial because most of them are unique. The reason they're advocating for this measure is they believe that a split roll assessment would generate anywhere between $7 and $12 billion a year in additional property tax revenues statewide, which they suggest would be substantially allocated to public education, which would likely see a 25 to 30% percentage of all the new revenue. It also suggests that LA County governments, schools, the county, and cities would receive an additional $3 billion. So let me tell you a little bit about the challenges that we in the assessor's office and other assessors are evaluating to deal with split roll should it go into effect. So there's about 180,000 commercial industrial properties in Los Angeles County. We estimate that of that 180,000, probably 130 to 140,000 of those would probably fall within the parameters of the split roll measure. Currently, somewhere between 6,000 and 10,000 commercial properties change hands annually, meaning that there's a transfer or some type of event that causes them to be reassessed. So from a workload perspective, you can see what the difference is going from 6,000 annual reassessments to 130 to 140,000 every year. At this point, we don't have the personnel to reassess that many properties within a brief period of time. The measure gives us, I believe, 18 months to reassess all those properties. We won't be able to do it without using mass appraisal techniques which we've not used for many decades. We've done an analysis. We estimate that I would need to hire an additional 700 new staff members. Let me go back to where we started at the beginning. I have just under 1,400 total number of employees today, of which about 700 of them are appraisers. So I would need to increase my total staff by another 700, about 50% increase, of which about 500 of those employees would need to be appraisers, trained to do commercial, industrial valuations. So that also creates a challenge for me. On a good year, on a typical year, about 30 appraisers will retire or leave the department for one reason or other. I can, if I work really hard, I can hire 2 classes of 30 each, which would net me about 40 to 45 appraisers. So it's really difficult to hire and train enough people to fill in that gap that's estimated by the by our study of a split role. And we estimate that the cost increase to my department would be about $130 million a year to my current $200 million budget. So we're trying to find ways, if it is adopted, how do we do this within the very short time frame that the measure gives us to implement it? How do we recruit, train, and onboard hundreds of new appraisers given our current limitations? One of the strategies that we're looking toward is working with the State Board of Equalization, which is the agency which licenses government appraisers, to see if we can train them outside of government agencies, maybe through the community colleges or through the Cal State system, to provide them that basic training and to hopefully get them licensed, so that when we hire them, all we have to do is train them on our systems. It still will create challenges. The average amount of training it takes statewide for commercial industrial appraiser is 5 years. It takes 2 years of basic training just to make a qualified residential appraisers. So the timelines are really significant and difficult for us to meet. There's a number of points that still need to be defined by the legislature or adjudicated in court to see how this final measure will be rolled out, if it should be adopted. And this is going to be further complicated by the impact of COVID-19. One of the biggest challenges is that LA County has declared a hiring freeze. So at a time when I need to think about hiring an additional 700 employees, we're not hiring anybody. And we lost about 30 appraisers this year due to retirement. We had anticipated hiring a class in June to replace them. We're not able to do that, so we're going to be even further behind the 8 ball should split roll passes. A lot of speculation now about what the odds are of split roll being adopted in November. I have I don't really have any clairvoyance at this point. I can see arguments on both sides. I think the opponents will say that in the wake of the economic devastation due to COVID, now is not the time to be changing our property tax system. I can see the proponents saying, with the number of people struggling, this is the time to generate more money from businesses who they will advocate of not paying their fair share. So it'll be interesting to see how this develops, these narratives develop over the course of the next couple of months. So I'm going to stop there. I think I've talked a lot at this point, but I want to thank you again for inviting me to speak with you. I want to thank Mindy and Sharon for your leadership during this very, very difficult time for realtors, and I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone may have. I have sitting at my side, you can't hear her, but she's here, Carol Kwan, who you all know, who will help me answer any questions that are too difficult for me. But thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to share this information with you.
Thank you very much, Jeff. I appreciate it. Your help is very much appreciated during this special time. Absolutely. We do have a few questions here. First one is, Is there a time limit for property tax assessment appeal?
Yes, there is. So the assessment appeal period opens on July the 2nd. So don't file an appeal now, wait till July the 2nd, and it closes on November 30th. Carol, can we extend that? The deadline? So no, you have July 2nd until November 30th is when you should file an appeal if you think your property assessment is too high. It certainly would encourage you to do so. Keep in mind that the appeals process will slow way down, so you may not get answers as quickly as you would like if you file. But if you think you can justify that, by all means, go ahead and file your appeal.
Thank you. Here's another one. Is there a penalty for filing a change in ownership form after 150 days of death?
There is a penalty for failing to file a change in ownership, death of real property. It is 10% of the property taxes that would have been due after the reassessed property. I will say that as a general rule, we do not apply that penalty, but that is a penalty that we are able to apply. We tend to be very generous with that because we learn that most people simply don't know they're supposed to do that. So I'm hoping that as realtors that this is another one of those important issues that I urge you to share with your clients and your prospective clients about what you need to do if your loved one dies and leaves property to file that form. One of the other challenges that happens all the time is that they don't file the death notice with us. They don't file Proposition 58, and then later in the year they get a supplemental tax bill, and they said, "I don't know why I got this. It was my mother's house. I inherited it. I thought I was supposed to be exempt." Again, if you don't file those, we don't know. And if you wait too long, while we can usually unravel it. Sometimes we can only do it prospectively, so you might be on the hook for some past taxes if you don't do it quickly enough. Timing is everything.
Thank you. Here's another one. When do you reassess the tax property during a new build home prior to its completion? We assess property, including what's called partially complete parcels. So on January the 1st, if you are 20% done on building your new home, we will assess you at 20% of the estimated completed value. So we assess every year. Just because you're under construction doesn't mean you won't be assessed. A lot of people, that's another point of confusion. People think that they're not reassessed until it's complete. That is not the case. On January 1st of every year, we'll look at everything that's out there. If it's partially complete, we will enroll a partially complete value. Thank you. That's pretty much all the questions.
Okay. Well, if there's nothing else, I thank you very much. I'll make sure I check on the chat line below, and I'll answer some questions individually for those who are directing toward me.
We do have one more question. Here's
sure.
Hotels. Is hotels affected as well?
Yes, they are. So hotels, we assess hotels. We don't. We use some different valuation methodologies on hotels. We will frequently look at cost valuation and income valuation with those. But I'm certain that hotels are going to be severely impacted.
Got it. Thank you very much, Jeff.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great one.
Thanks. All right.
All right, that's all the breakfast meetings for today. So now this meeting is now adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Have a great one. Stay home and stay safe. See you next week.